Hello and welcome to today's video. We will be doing a deep dive into strings today. A JavaScript string is a bit of data that is of any length, so it can be 0 characters or more. So even if you create a string with just 2 quotes, that is considered a string. Example of a string, we just say let basic text example equal some words. You can also see that if we create empty example which just equals 2 double quotes with no content, that is still considered a string. To test this, you can use the console.log just to print to the console, and then we use the function type of that will tell us what type of variable we are using. So in this case, both of them come up as string. For strings, you can use single quotes, double quotes, or even backticks. However, these do serve a special purpose. So as you can see in this example, with the single quotes, Jimmy cracked corn. With the double quotes, Jimmy cracked corn. And then for the backticks, and I don't care. If we use the console.log on all 3 of those variables, you will see that all 3 of them still print out normal strings. Notice how the last example also contained a single quote, so you can put any set of quotes inside another as long as they are not the same. If you use a single quote, you can use the double quotes or backticks, but you cannot use a single quotes anywhere in that same string. Now, let's get stuck in some string shiz. To find out how long a string is, you can use the .length property. Notice how this does not have any parentheses. That's because this is a property, technically not a function. This is a built-in property of all strings. So now, if we go to our example and we click save, you'll see that it prints out 4. However, we only see 3 characters. That's because spaces also count as characters. Next up, we'll be looking at escaping. This is a technique to print special characters in code without it causing a whole array of issues. In this example, you can see that the string Kazuhiko Smoky Nagata is showing some errors. The reason for this is that we are using double quotes for the string as well as double quotes for the nickname Smokey. Well, that's a bit of a problem, but we can just use a different set of quotes to resolve the issue. While that is true, if you are working on some legacy system or have a style guide that you need to use double quotes, what do we do now? We escape the characters. That's what we do. You will now see that in the second example, string correct Smokey, we can see that Kazuhiko Smoky Nagata is no longer giving any errors. So if we now just save, you will see that this does print out without any errors. So in order to escape a character, all you have to do is add a backslash. Then those pesky special characters will all just work fine. There are a few escape characters you can use, however there's pretty much only 2 you will really need to know in the real world. First off, we have the \n. This is a new line character. In the example here we can see string escape characters equals line 1, and then we have \n, and then line 2. If we now save this, you will notice that the console does actually print it out as 2 separate lines. And the second one you need to know is \t, which is a tab. So if we just add a \t to our previous example, hit save, you will now see that line 2 has an indentation of 4 spaces, which is 1 tab. Breaking lines of code is a fairly normal thing to do, as you don't just want to create code that works, you want to create code that works and is also readable, that you can easily update it if you need to, or perhaps add some extra features. A common standard is to cut the line at 80 characters. This was due to older screens only being able to show 80 characters in a single line of the screen due to the resolution. However, modern screens are wider, can fit more characters, plus you can just change the font size, Also, VS Code can automatically do this for you, however the automatic way does not always yield the best results. So I would suggest that you manually do this. Normally, if you break a line of code, you would do this after an operator, so something like this, where you can see string some long string equals, and then on the next line we say on another line, semicolon, and then if we console.log that, we'll see that it works perfectly fine. However, if it's a string that you need to split, the safest option is to use the plus operator, which as we know is the concatenation operator in JavaScript. You can also use the / escaping character to move your string to another line. However, this is generally not the preferred way to do this. In most cases, the correct way to do so would be to change this to a plus. The better way to do this would be to exchange the / for a plus, which is the concatenate operator. Just a side note, you can turn an object into a string, but I'm not going to show you how to do that, as this serves no purpose, makes your code slower, and makes things more complicated than it needs to be. So know that it exists, but also know that it's a poopy choice, and don't do this, kids. Now, in the next section, we're going to be doing a bit of a speed run. This section will have all kinds of string methods / functions that you can use. There are quite a few of them, so let's go over these real quick. These will be done in alphabetical order for no reason that I could think of. First, we'll start with char at. This method will return the character at a specific index. Just remember that JavaScript starts counting from 0 and not 1. So as an example, if we say string methods.char at and let's say index 2, it will return I from the word this. So in this example, we can see that it's 0 for T, 1 for H, and 2 for I. Next, we have char code at. This will return the UTF-16 code for the character. This is a value between 0 and 65,535. This requires a video onto its own. However, long story short, this is a number value for a character, but this includes emojis and certain symbols. Anyhow, look here at index 1, which is character 2, we get 104, as here. Ain't that neat? Next, we have the concat function. Concat serves the same purpose as the plus operator. However, if you wish to use the concat method, it would look like this, as you can see over here. In this example, we've added a space and another string. You can separate more strings with just adding a comma inside this method's argument, so you can have as many strings as you want inside that. Next, we will be looking at length. Length is technically a function, so it's on the list. It returns the length of the string, including spaces, as they are also characters. Remember the UTF-16 code characters? Correct, spaces are part of those. As a task for you, you can use the char code at method to find out what the number is of the space and some of the most common characters. Feel free to comment them down below. Anyhow, here's how to use the length function. We can literally say console.log string methods.length. Again, notice there's no parentheses, as this is technically not a function, but a method, but technically a function. Next, we are looking at the pad end. Pad end will pad a string with another string, X amount of times until X length is reached. Yeah, it's a little confusing, so let's use our example string. It is of length 27, so let's say that we want it to reach the length of 35. Well, we can use a pad length and pad the rest of the string with x's. So in this case, we can see console.log string methods.padEnd. The first argument is 35, which is the length we would like it to be, and the second argument is x, which is the string that we want to pad it with. And thus, it will go from our normal string up to 27 characters, or an index of 27, and then it will pad the rest out with x's. So, this does require two arguments. First is the required length, and the second is the string to use to fill it out with. This can be a word, a string, or a single letter. So in the first example, we used just x. Comment that out. Move it to the next one. Now you will see that we have the second argument as ZAA. Then we will see it says ZA. Pad start works exactly the same as pad end, except that it adds those characters to the front of a string instead of the end. Just as an example, you can see that we've added all the x's to the front of the string just to pad it out to 35 characters. So now looking to our previous example here, the string method, the string is this is the example string. We are now going to be looking at the replace function. The replace function finds the first instance of a string and replaces it with another. So it also requires two arguments. First, the string that you are looking for, and the second is the string you want to replace it with. In this example, we're going to look for the word example and replace it with cool. So if we now just save it, you will see instead of saying this is an example string, it says this is the cool string. However, trying to replace all the i's with a's will result in only one changing. As you can see, it says this is the example string. Some things to keep in mind when using replace. It only finds the first instance of that string, and also it does not modify the string it is called on, it returns a new string instead. So the original string stays the same. Now we will look at replace all. Replace all, well, it does what it says. It will replace all instances of a string provided, instead of just the first one, as with just replace. So as an example, if we now try to replace all the i's with a's, it will actually work. So if we now go ahead and save this, it now says, thus is the example strong. Next we will be looking at slice. Slice will return a sliced version of your string. You provided a start position and an end position. The end position is not included. So let's say that we want to return just the first word of our string. We will say slice from index 0, in which that is the start of the string, all the way to index 4, which is the first space. But remember that the last index is not included, so it just returns the word this, as you can see over here. If you do not provide any end position, it will start from the first position and return everything after it. So now let's remove the first word. We will say slice from 5, which is after the first space, and don't provide a second argument, and huzzah, the first word has been cut out. It now just says is the example string. You can also input a negative number. Then it will work in reverse, so you can start counting from the end instead of the start of the word. So if you want only the last word, you can say -7. You might think it should be 6 because JavaScript starts counting from 0. Absolutely true. However, because you are starting at the end, we don't need to start at 0, as well 0 is the beginning of the word, not the end. JavaScript, everyone. Next we'll be looking at split. Split will take a string and create an array out of it. All you need to do is give it a character you want to split it by. So let's say we want to split the example string by the spaces. We will then just say string methods.split, and then in parentheses we put double quotes with a space in between, and now we have an array. Just keep in mind you can split by any character, so you can technically use this to filter out a CSV file. But here you can see now that we filtered it by space, each word is in a separate index of this array. However, here's something interesting. If we just comment out that and we use exactly the same thing, except we remove the space from the double quotes, you will now see that it adds each character into its own index, and this includes spaces as well. Next, we will be looking at sub-str. Sub-str is similar to slice, however, there's a small difference. The second parameter will be the length of the string you want, so instead of providing the exact index for the start and end, you provide the start index and how many characters should be returned. So to pull the first word, we will start at index 0, and the length should be 4 characters long, and huzzah, dunsies, now have this. Substring is similar to slice as well, however it does not accept negative numbers. They will be treated as 0 regardless, otherwise pretty much the same. In the example, I have said that -7, which will be treated as a 0, and omitted the second argument, which means that it will return from index 0 all the way to the end, which will just return the whole string. Next, we'll be looking at the toLowercase function, which takes your string and converts it to all lowercase. The toUppercase function is very similar to the lowercase one, except it puts it in all uppercase. Who'd have thunk? So, for the next few examples, we are going to be using a different example string. So in this case, the string new example is equal to, this has 3 spaces in the front and 4 at the end. First of all, let's just print that out, and we can see that there are indeed spaces both in the front and at the back. So first we will look at the trim function. The trim function removes empty space or white space from both the beginning and the end of a string. It removes leading spaces and trailing spaces. I know, right? JavaScript has a built-in function for that. So why in the name of all that is holy does Excel not have this built in by default when copying things? Wild. Anyway, if we check out our example over here, you will see that there are no longer any spaces in the front or at the back. Now, if we look at the next one, which is trim end, notice that it does exactly the same thing, but it just removes the spaces at the back. Likewise for trim start, you'll see that the spaces at the back are still there, but the ones at the front are no longer there. Amazing. So now you can do all sorts of things to a string. But now what if we want to find something in a string? Well, good news, there are quite a few methods one can use to do exactly that. So let's check those out. In order to show you how these work, our new example string is going to be, you should have turned left at the last turn. We are going to start with the index of method. This method will provide you with the index of where the first occurrence is of the string you provide as an argument. In our example, we are looking for the word turn. Note that technically there is two occurrences of this. In the word turned, as that starts at position 16. Remember, it starts counting from 0, not at 1, which is the one we see here. So as you can see, it shows index 16. Next is last index of. This is similar to index of, however, it shows you the last occurrence of the string as opposed to the first. So in this example, it will be 40, as the 40th index in that string is the start of the T in turn. Just two things to note about these two methods. One, they will both return -1 if they cannot find the string provided, so it is easy enough to know when the string is not present. Two, they both can take in a second argument, which is the index of where to start looking. So as per our previous example, we know that the first occurrence of the string is at position 16. So let's start the search from position 17. Now it will show position 40 as the new first occurrence. Pretty useful. Somewhere, I guess. To note, on the last index of, please note it searches backwards. So if you set position 30, then it will find the turn string in the beginning of the example string. So let's comment out this one and use the last index of, and you will now see that it returns 16 because that is the turn over here in the first part of the string. Now it does show 16, exactly like using index of. This is because of the specific string we are using, as it only has two occurrences of the string. If you have more than that, you will probably get different results. Dope. Next up, we have the search method. This will initially look very similar to index of, but I'll explain the difference shortly. First up, the string search example.search for turn. Interesting. It also provides us with the index of 16, exactly like index of. However, there are two main differences. One, search cannot take a second argument for the starting position, and two, search has one big advantage over index of, and that is regular expressions. So now here you will see, if we see console.log string search example.search, and you will notice that we are using /turn/. So this is just regex for searching for the word turn. If you have not heard of regular expressions, comment down below and I will make a video on how it works. But for now, regular expression is just a way to use some string characters to create really powerful and complex searches, matching phone numbers, emails, all kinds of things. All can be done with regular expressions. Now in our example, it is a bit basic, but this is just a introduction to what it can actually do. Next up, we will have match. This one is a bit strange, as it does not just return the index of the first occurrence, it returns an array with the first occurrence and what input was, as well as some other goodies. However, if you use regex and add the /g flag, which is global search, now you see its use comes into play. Now it will actually create an array with all the occurrences, so you can have a count of how many times this was used. Now we will look at match all. This works a little differently. So first of all, match all returns an iterator, which means it's something you can loop over to see all the values. So first, we will need to assign this result to a new variable, which we've done here as let iterator, and then we can convert it to an array. No need to fret if you are unsure of what is happening. This will be covered in later videos. But essentially, the array.from method just takes an iterator and turns it into an array. This way we can print it to the console to see what's happening. Anyhow, look at that. We can now see for each occurrence of the word turn, it shows us the index as well as some other info. Now that's quite interesting. Please note that you can also use regex with match all. If you do, you have to use the /g for global search, or the regex will not work correctly. One of those JavaScript things. Next up, we have the includes function. This will return a Boolean value, true if it finds a string and false if it does not find it. It can also use a second argument to specify the string starting position. However, in this example, we can see that it returns false. And the reason for that is that includes is case sensitive. If we change that to a lowercase t and save, now it will return true. Looking at the next two methods, starts with and ends with. They are similar, however one checks the start of a string and the other checks the end. So in our case, let's say starts with is you. Please note that this is case sensitive also in both methods. You will see that it returns true. And for our second example, we use the ends with methods with turn with an exclamation, and it also returns true. And that's it for searching of the strings. Now on to our last section on strings, which is template literals. This will make working with strings and concatenation of user info and strings so much easier. First up, in order to define a template literal, you can use the backticks. You can see over here. As opposed to using single or double quotes. You can use both single and double quotes inside string literals. Ain't that something? You will notice this prints exactly like a normal string. However, I used both single and double quotes inside that string and it printed just fine. As you can see over here, we've got the single quotes and double quotes inside one string. You can also use string literals for multi-line. If we tab that out, comment all the below, you will notice once we save, it prints out a little wonky. Notice how the same string is now formatted differently. That's because the string literal respects white spaces. So however you format your string, it will be printed exactly like that. Now here's where the straight power of template literals comes into play. Adding a $sign and two curly braces, we can now substitute variables into our string. We can now create two new variables as const. String 1 will be the word cool and string 2 will be the string literal. Now add them to your string like below. You can see in these parts over here. We've kept the single and double quotes just as before. And if we save, you can see it says this is a cool string literal. Now that is on its own hella awesome. But that doesn't stop there. You can actually use expressions inside of string literals. So if you want to work out some value, let's say 5 plus 10, but I want it in the string with template literals, let's say that num1 is 5 and num2 is 10, let's make string literal showing the whole formula. So in this case, we've said console.log, this is, and then our string literal box here with num1 plus num2 equals num1 plus num2. and you will notice that it literally prints out both the variables as well as the total. Now you know strings. Actually, you are now a string guru. If you have any topics or ideas that you would like more clarification on, please feel free to comment down below. Next week, we'll be looking more in depth into numbers. Much like this week's video, it's going to be an in-depth look into numbers, from number methods all the way to number properties, and after that, you will also be a number guru. As always, thank you very much for all the support and suggestions. I really appreciate all the input, and congratulations, you have leveled up in programming. I will hopefully see you again in the next week's video.